In this quick lecture, I'll discuss shared pointers that manage or own heap arrays. To get started again, I have the entity class and I have the memory file included. So in the main function, what I can do is I'll instantiate a shared pointer, and as with the unique pointer, I can do something like this. Okay, so we want this to manage an entity array, and then to get started, I'll use the construct initialization here where I'll pass in new entity. Okay, this is an array. I have the subscript operator I pass into for 2 elements, and of course you can pass in the particular list. So for example, let's say for the first element, this first element is going to get constructed using this. I'll pass in 55 for the constructor, so the member should be 55, and the member for the second element, since I don't initialize that explicitly, should be 0. I'm just using entity here because again we have these destructor printouts, but if I have a fundamental type such as an integer, for example, I'll actually just copy this to show you. It'll look something like this. I allocate a new array on the heap here, and I pass in these elements for the initialization, 1 and 2. So if we can do something like this now, actually I'll just rename that to shared pointer integer array. And before we build and run, I'd like to mention that the subscript operator for the shared pointer was introduced in C++ 17. So I'll just go up here to the project, and then I'll click on the properties for that. Go to the properties for the project, and then I'll make sure that the language standard here is set to C++ 17. Okay, so if you want your shared pointers to own arrays, then you want to set this to C++ 17 or higher. So I'll start with that, and I'll click apply, OK, and I'll build and run now. Okay, that prints at 1, that is the first element, and both of those entity objects in the entity array will get allocated. The first one was 55, as we have it specified right here. When other words, the member of that entity was initialized to 55 using this construction. Okay, and I just wanted to show you with this example, this is a shared pointer integer array, that you can also use the fundamental types, not just user-defined types. The array that a shared pointer manages is an array of entities, so it's an array of objects, not an array of pointers. So this returns an object, element 0, okay, which is going to be this element right here. And then we do toString on that, build around that, and we should get 55, and that's what we get. Then we get end of program, and it's going to deallocate both of the objects in that entity array. Next, I want to talk about the makeShared function again, so I'll go and make some changes to this statement. Okay, in this statement, I'll go and use the setMember function to initialize the member of the first element in the array. Okay, we have 0 here in the subscript operator, and with this I'll set the member of the first element, which is an entity, to 55. And then I have this for statement right here, and I'm going to loop through the array, and I'm going to do toString on each element. Okay, now it's important to note that this should crash, so I'll just try and build that, Control B, or not crash, but we should get a failed actually. And the issue is that this syntax is not really supported with makeShared until C++ 20, so you should try and avoid using makeShared to allocate heap arrays. That is until C++ 20 becomes the standard. And what we can do is we can go to the project properties. Okay, and then I can change that to the preview features from the latest C++ working draft, and then I can apply that. Now I would like to note, if you have C++ 20 available within this list, then of course you're going to select that. But for now, I'll just select that latest C++ working draft, click apply and click OK, and then this will work now. I can build and run this. And it should print out the value of those members for each one of those elements, so we get 55 and 0. Of course, we get 0 with the second element because the constructor is going to initialize the member of that element to 0. It is going to use the default constructor, which has a default argument of 0. And then we get the entity destructor invoked for both of those elements within the entity array on the heap. Remember again that this is the constructor for the entity. We have int member parameter, and we have a default argument of 0 for that. To wrap up this lecture, let's summarize. If you want a shared pointer to manage an array on the heap, then you want to use at least C++ 17. And if you want to use make shared with that, as we have it here, then you want to use at least C++20. Because you do not want to spend too much time on these examples with the heap array managed by the shared pointer, because as with a heap array managed by a unique pointer, that is not something that you will use often. There are purpose-made containers in the standard template library for this type of thing, which we will discuss in a future lesson, such as the standard array class and the standard vector class. Okay, that is going to wrap up this lecture. I'll see you next time.